Hey YouTube, Bob here. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that isn't unique to Nintendo collectors and gamers, but it does lend itself a little bit more to those of us who do focus more on Nintendo consoles. And that's the topic of connecting your console. Because as a collector and a gamer, you always want to make sure that you're getting the best picture quality from the system that you're using. And Nintendo, unlike any other manufacturer that's around and making consoles today, their consoles date back farther than any others. And because of that, they've seen several different ways to connect, at least as far as video goes, to various TVs. And there are some ways that are better than others to connect some of your vintage and more modern Nintendo consoles to TVs. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. As a Nintendo gamer and collector, something I try my best to do is preserve the original gaming experience. And what I mean by that is I don't like to use emulators. I always want to play my Nintendo games on the original hardware and controllers that they were designed for. And I also want to try to use the TV or display that was appropriate for the time. If you've watched other videos on YouTube in the gaming community, you've probably come across those who are dead set against playing older video game systems on modern LCD HD TVs. And there's a good reason for that. They weren't designed for them, and they don't look very good on them. And so that's the second part in me trying to preserve the original gaming experience. I like to use CRT or cathode ray tube TVs on the older systems, and as early on as the GameCube through the Wii and the Wii U, I will use an LCD HD TV. And given that Nintendo's been around so long, like I said, there are various ways that you can connect those consoles to the TVs. And as I go through each console, I'm going to be taking a look at the Japanese and the US consoles. I'll explain a little bit of the technical specs of the connections, and believe me, I'm not an expert, so if I say something that's inaccurate, please feel free to let me know in the comments. But I'll go through each console and let you know all of the possible ways to hook them up, and I will tell you what I think, at least from my personal experience, is the best way to hook them up to the TV to get the best picture quality for that system. So we're going to be going through RF, composite video, S-video, YPBPR, which is a type of component video, and of course, HDMI. So to get things started here, we're going to be taking a look at Nintendo's first home console with interchangeable cartridges, which in Japan that was known as the Famicom, and in the United States and Europe it was known as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. As usual, as I only collect Japanese and US NTSC consoles, I don't have the European PAL console to take a look at, but I can safely say I believe that any video output that was available on the US Nintendo Entertainment System was also available on the PAL Nintendo Entertainment System. I know there are some video formats in Europe such as SCART, S-C-A-R-T, that weren't used here in the United States, and whether or not Nintendo ever put out an official SCART cable for their consoles, I don't know. I don't think so, but if you do know, let me know in the comments. So these two systems, we're taking a look at the top or the back of them, and the Famicom in Japan was capable of outputting video in only one format, and that is RF, or radio frequency. And in order to do that, what was included with the system, and I believe this is one of the few Japanese systems that actually included the AC adapter and the video out hookup, you got your RF switch, which this one's kind of interesting looking. It's tailored very much to older TVs that have these screws that you can undo and then pinch a metal Y connector in to hook up other external sources to your TV. But the way RF works is it takes the video signal and broadcasts it over a weak signal channel on your TV. In Japan, the channels available for RF modulation are channel 1 and channel 2. So whichever channel you got a better picture on you would choose that one to play your games on, and you could switch between the two. In the United States, and I'll get to the NES in a moment, you can see your choices were channel 3 and channel 4. You picked whichever channel you got a better video signal on. But with the Japanese Famicom, the way it would work is you plug this end here of your RF adapter into your Famicom console here, and then this end of the RF cable you would plug into the back of your TV. And you would be looking for the coaxial input, which on the back of TVs, older TVs, and even on some of the more modern LCD HD TVs, they still do have coaxial inputs. It's a metal connector with a sort of threaded screw design, and this particular adapter here doesn't require that you screw the tip on. You can just put it over the adapter like that. And if you were tuned into channel 1 or 2 on your Japanese TV, this RF switch would broadcast the Famicom audio and video over that channel, and that's how you could see and hear your game. An unfortunate limitation with RF is it does not provide very good picture or sound quality. The picture oftentimes was a little bit fuzzy, depending on the reception, and the sound was reduced to mono, which means you didn't get the stereo separation. Now for the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Famicom, this wasn't a very big deal because it didn't output stereo sound. You got only one channel. And for the most part, TVs of the time only had one speaker. But as technology progressed, TVs gradually became capable of outputting audio and stereo. And we'll see that with the Super Famicom and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Now the Famicom was able to only output RF video, which was unfortunate. The Nintendo Entertainment System, however, when it was brought over to the United States and to Europe, added a video output. In addition to be able to output RF, radio frequency, like the Famicom, and you could do that using this version of the RF adapter. Same principle, same way to do it. You just plug this end in here to the RF switch output, and then you screwed this onto the back of your the coaxial input on your TV. But given that there was a 2-year delay between the release of the Famicom in Japan and the NES in the United States, 1983 versus 1985, I think technology allowed for them to include a second type of audio and video output for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and that is composite video and mono audio. And the way you would do that is you would use the cable that was packaged with every Nintendo Entertainment System. Looks like this. You match the yellow to yellow and red to red, and you would get composite video and mono audio. Now, like I said, the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Famicom did not have stereo separation as far as the sound channels went in their games, so having mono was really not that big a deal, unless of course you had a stereo setup with your TV, which meant that you would get audio only out of the right or the left speaker, depending on which channel you plugged this into. If you plugged it into the red like you were supposed to, you would probably be getting the audio out of the right channel. The way around this is to use some sort of adapter, and this is the one that I use. This basically just splits the audio channel, and it puts it into both the left and the right on your TV or on your AV receiver. And then that allows you to get simulated stereo. It's still mono, but at least you're getting sound out of both channels. So the audio in that regard is much improved. It's not as fuzzy. The video quality is also not as fuzzy. Using composite video, composite is a video signal that takes all the color information, the vertical hold, all those types of things, and puts them into one signal lead. And it provides a much better picture quality than the original radio frequency modulation that you would get out of the back. And we would see some improvements on the composite audio video, the composite video with the Super Famicom in Japan and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in the US and in the rest of the world. So in 1990, the Super Famicom was released in Japan, and in 1991 the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was released in the United States. And since it was released later than the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System, obviously there were some improvements to the audio and video output. The Super Famicom and the Super NES both still provided for RF out. You could still use the same RF adapter on these systems, and that was actually something that Nintendo advertised. Something that's interesting to note is these RF adapters, what you could do once you plug this end into the system, like if you were going to plug your NES into the TV, you would do just like that. And then if you wanted to have your Super Nintendo Entertainment System hooked up to the same TV and didn't want to have to switch cables, what they had on the back here was another coaxial in. And you could plug your cable TV into that so the cable could be fed through this, or you could connect another RF adapter to have more than one Nintendo system hooked up to the TV at a time. And that was something that Nintendo was trying to advertise for the convenience of owning both the Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So both these systems still offered RF. What was different on these systems, both the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Famicom, is something called multi-out. And basically, that's just Nintendo's proprietary way of having a composite video cable coupled with a now stereo audio cable. Gone were the days of games with mono audio. You now got full 2-channel stereo. And the way that would work would be with the use of this cable. Nintendo's proprietary connection, and then the standard yellow composite video, and then the now stereo left audio and right audio. And this cable plugged, just like so, into the back of the system. And as far as collectors are concerned, it's interesting to note that this cable is universal in all regions. It will work just as well with a Japanese Super Famicom, with a US NTSC Super Nintendo Entertainment System, as well as the PAL Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Something that's interesting to note as well is that when this system first released in the United States, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, it came packaged with the multi-out cable, stereo AV. It also came with its own RF adapter. So they were giving you the choice as to the way you were going to hook this up to your TV. Because at that time, it was kind of transitional. All TVs still had RF, but in an attempt to feature the better graphics and sound of the system, Nintendo wanted to ensure that you had a way to enjoy those better graphics and sound. So they packaged this cable in with the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Something of note for collectors is there is a distinction, even though they look almost identical. I'll get my one for the Nintendo Entertainment System out here. These RF adapters here, you'll notice the one that was released with the NES just says NES Control Deck. That's where this cord goes to. This one that was released after the Super Nintendo was released says S in parentheses for Super, and then NES Control Deck. So if you do buy a package on eBay or some other online dealer, you want to make sure that you're getting the correct RF switch with them. If you buy a supposedly new in-box Nintendo Entertainment System and it comes with, or actually you go the other way around. If you buy a new in-box Super Nintendo Entertainment System and you see that this specifies NES Control Deck, well then you know that somebody has kind of mixed and matched the parts. After the Super Nintendo released in 1991 in the US, all the RF switches started to have the S in parentheses here. So just a sort of collector's note. Something else of interest, I think, is that after the Famicom, the consoles in Japan stopped being shipped with the AC adapter and the audio-video connector, which I think is an interesting move. I don't really understand why that was the case in Japan. But what I have here are a couple variations of the cable that you could purchase. This is the same AV cable that was shipped with the system in the United States and probably in PAL regions, but in Japan you had to buy it separately. This particular one here was released during the Nintendo 64 era because Nintendo used this connector for all of its systems, the Super Famicom through the GameCube. You can see the logos there for the Famicom. We'll get to the Famicom AV in a minute. That's what that was for, the Super Famicom and the Nintendo 64. This particular cable here is branded just for GameCube, and that's after, I guess, they stopped supporting the systems. They're still mentioned here on the side, of course, but this one's branded mainly for use with the GameCube, even though it will work with all of them. So in Japan, you had to buy these separately. Something else you could buy separately in Japan that, as far as I know, was not available in the United States. I mean, I was a kid, I was probably 12, 13, 14 years old, and the internet did not exist in the same capacity that it does now. So maybe this cable was available, but I don't think it was. This is a different format of video. This is called S-video. And what S-video stands for, believe it or not, is something as simple as separate video. They came up with a consumer name for it, which is Super Video. And of course they want to make it sound, you know, cooler than it is. But what separate video means is this black connector has 4 pins on it. And even though it has 4 pins on it, and this black connector, by the way, is replacing the yellow composite video, the 2 of the 4 connectors that this uses output 2 signals to the TV. It outputs a contrast signal, which is called luma, or a black signal, and that just makes the image, as far as the pixels on the cathode ray TV tube, look a lot sharper. The other pin outputs chroma, which is the color information. So by separating the color information and the contrast information in the signal, you get a lot sharper of a picture. A lot sharper than the composite or the yellow connector that we have here could provide. And I'm not going to get into too much of the specifics of the technical information between S-video and composite video because, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert. But what I can tell you is there is quite a difference. If you're using a CRT, one of those old glass TVs, cathode ray tube TV, you're going to notice a pretty big difference. And in fact, since I'm not going to get into it here, I'll put a link in the video description to a channel. It's called MN12Bird. Jake is MN12Bird. He doesn't put out videos too much anymore, but several years ago he did a pretty good video showing the difference between the sharpness of the S-video signal and kind of the blurriness or the bleeding between the pixels of the composite video. So this was an alternate way of getting an even better video signal out of your Super Famicom and your Super Nintendo Entertainment System. However, like I said, I don't think that this cable was ever made available in the United States. Or if it was, it wasn't easy to come by. So throughout the lifespan of the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and the Super Famicom, a redesign to the Famicom and the Nintendo Entertainment System was released in 1993. So we're going to be taking a look at those next.